She hijacked my project, deleted our work and thought no one would notice. For once, everything was going right. I had been with the company for a few years and had slowly built a reputation as someone who could take chaos and turn it into something functional. Training modules, onboarding programs, SOPs, if it was broken, I was the one they called. So when leadership asked me to take over a top priority client project, I jumped on it. This particular client had a problem. Their onboarding process was a 16-hour Frankenstein of bad narration, outdated PDFs, and PowerPoints that looked like they were designed in 1997. They knew it was a disaster. They just didn't know how to fix it. That's where I came in. We scoped it out. A full rebuild from scratch, user-focused, clean design, modular learning path, and built-in assessments. It wasn't just a facelift, it was a ground-up rewrite. I got a small team together, 1 developer, 2 designers, and a part-time writer. We held kickoff meetings, whiteboard sessions, feedback loops. We worked well together, fast, clean, efficient. The client loved our prototype. We were ahead of schedule, under budget, and for once, I wasn't spending my weekends cleaning up someone else's mess. It felt like we were actually going to deliver something great. Then the company hired someone new. Her title was something vague and senior sounding, Associate Director of something operations. Corporate fluff. She was above me, but not directly managing our project. At least, not at first. She came from one of those big-name companies, the kind that cares more about slide decks and buzzwords than actual results. And from day one, her energy screamed, "I'm here to fix something, whether it's broken or not." She joined our team meetings uninvited. Started making suggestions about format changes, even though she hadn't read the design docs. Sent out recaps after calls that rewrote what was actually said. I caught her once referring to the project as something she had steered back on course. We weren't off course. We were ahead. I kept trying to play nice. I answered her emails. I explained why we did things the way we did. I included her in updates, until she started rewriting them before forwarding to leadership. I knew what was happening. She was taking credit. Slowly, strategically, trying to position herself as the savior of a project that didn't need saving. Still, I kept my head down. I documented everything, saved emails, took screenshots, archived version histories, just in case. And then, suddenly, things started breaking. Files disappeared from the shared drive. Not deleted, moved. Renamed, reorganized in ways that made no sense. Our master storyboard was replaced with an older version, full of typos and placeholder text. Voiceover scripts were overwritten. Audio drafts went missing. I thought it was a glitch at first, until I traced it back through the version logs. She had done it. Her account had gone in, during off hours, and rolled back nearly 2 weeks of work. No reason, no warning, just gone. I confronted her about it. Politely, carefully. I asked if she had made changes intentionally or if it was a mistake. She smiled, actually smiled, and said, "I think we needed to revisit the foundation anyway." Revisit the foundation. We were 6 weeks from launch. The client had already approved the content she had just nuked. We would have to redo everything. But if I made a scene, I would be the problem. So I stayed calm. Took notes, made backups, pulled my team into a side chat and told them not to delete anything. At this point, she had full access to our folders, and her edits were getting more aggressive. She inserted references to outdated policies, added entire paragraphs into scripts that made no instructional sense, changed graphics to ones that didn't match our visual standard. The client noticed. Asked questions. I had to scramble to reassure them that the final version would be polished. But behind the scenes, the project was teetering. We were burning time and morale trying to clean up sabotage disguised as oversight. And I knew if she kept going, we'd miss the deadline. The project would flop, and she'd spin it as us not being adaptive enough. That's when I decided, if she was going to play dirty, I'd play smart. And I started building the case. At this point, I had accepted that this wasn't some misunderstanding or clash of workflows, this was deliberate. She wasn't streamlining or adding value. She was injecting herself into the project so she could stake a claim on the outcome. And if she destroyed it in the process, collateral damage. Her edits were getting worse. She started replacing approved copy with language that contradicted compliance standards. She pulled in design assets from other teams, badly formatted, misaligned junk, and insisted they be included in the next draft. I pushed back, gently at first. I think the client preferred the previous version of that screen, I'd say. Or, we're running out of time for this kind of revision. We've already coded that section. She'd always smile, always deflect. Let's test both versions and see which performs better. Except there was no time for testing. We were weeks away from launch, and her version was barely coherent. So I escalated to my manager. I showed screenshots, outlined timelines, sent emails. The response: I hear you, but she's still settling into the role. Let's give her some space to contribute. Space to contribute. She was actively damaging the product. And I was running out of room to protect the project without being seen as the problem myself. So I changed tactics. I stopped trying to fight her head on. I played along. I thanked her for her input in emails and kept every message short, polite, and specific. If she changed something, I logged it. If she edited a script, I saved the version before and after. I made a private folder and mirrored the entire project, one we controlled. Just in case. Then, one Monday morning, I logged into our shared folder and saw it. Entire sections were gone. Gone. Not renamed, not hidden, deleted. I checked the activity log. Her account, timestamped Sunday night. She had purged 3 weeks worth of work. This wasn't sabotage by accident. This was straight up wreckage. I went cold. Not angry, focused. I already had backups. The work wasn't truly lost. But now I had what I needed. I called a quick meeting with the team and calmly said we'd be rebuilding using the backup structure, just to be safe. No panic, no blaming, but I could see the worry in their eyes. They knew what had happened. I sent an email to leadership documenting the incident. I kept it clinical. Observed deletion of approved content on date confirmed in system logs. Reverted using prior backup. No data loss, but flagged for awareness. No accusation, just facts. And then, she made her biggest mistake. That afternoon, I got a calendar invite from her. No subject line, just a time block with her name. I joined, unsure what to expect. She launched into a monologue about version control, team dynamics, and how some people weren't collaborating effectively. She didn't name me, but it was obvious. Then she said it. I noticed some files were restored without proper approval, and I've gone ahead and cleared out the unnecessary duplicates. I sat there, stunned. She was admitting it. Not just admitting she deleted files, but framing it like she was fixing my mistake. I ended the call, smiled, and saved the meeting transcript. That was it. The smoking gun. I now had system logs showing she deleted files, prior versions proving the work was approved, meeting transcripts where she took credit for removing them, a full backup showing the changes she had overwritten, and I was done playing defense. I scheduled a one-on-one with a senior director from another department who'd worked with me before and trusted me. I laid it all out, calmly, cleanly, in chronological order. I didn't ask for revenge. I didn't demand action. I just showed the receipts. Her face went pale halfway through. Has anyone else seen this? Not yet, I said. But the launch deadline is in 2 weeks. If this continues, we miss it. And the client won't be the one taking the fall. She nodded. Leave it with me. What happened next moved fast. And silently. I wasn't looped in, but I didn't need to be. Her edits stopped immediately. Her name disappeared from the folder permissions. She stopped attending meetings. And 3 days later, her profile vanished from the company directory. No announcement. No farewell email. Just gone. But the best part. The work she tried to destroy. Launched. On time. Fully intact. After she disappeared from the company directory, there was no memo. No explanation. No HR update. Just silence. The next team meeting felt strange. Everyone showed up like usual, but her name was missing from the attendee list. No one asked why. No one brought it up. It was like the company was trying to pretend she'd never been there. The air felt lighter, but the tension hadn't fully left. Everyone on the team knew what had happened. They might not have known all the details, but they'd seen the chaos, the deleted files, the last-minute reversions, the forced updates that made no sense. And they noticed when all of it stopped. Our internal chat started buzzing more than usual, but privately. One colleague messaged me, "She's gone, right? You handled that." I didn't confirm or deny anything. I just said, "The project's back on track." That was enough. The launch itself went off without a hitch. The client was thrilled. Positive feedback rolled in within the first week. Faster completions, better user scores, and an almost 90% drop in help desk tickets. The kind of stats you want to shout from the rooftops. I kept it professional. I passed all the praise to the team. But internally, I felt something deeper than pride. I felt relief. Not just because the project had survived, but because my instincts had been right. I had trusted myself, documented everything, and moved carefully when it mattered most. What I didn't expect was how quickly people started rewriting the narrative around her. Within a week of her exit, people started floating theories. Some thought she had accepted a job elsewhere. Others said she had clashed with leadership and moved on. One person even suggested she had been hired to shake things up and left after the mission was complete. It was surreal. I had spent months watching her dismantle a working process, undermine my team, delete critical files, and now people were trying to write her a graceful exit. I could have corrected them. I could have sent the logs to everyone, let them know exactly what happened. But I didn't. I didn't need to, because her absence spoke louder than anything I could have said. One senior manager pulled me aside during a virtual coffee chat. "Whatever happened with that situation," she said, "I'm glad you were here. You kept things from blowing up." That was the first time I heard anyone officially acknowledge it. And while the company never said it directly, I noticed things change. My access expanded. I was asked to sit in on more planning calls. My feedback was specifically requested by departments that used to ignore our work. Quietly, my reputation grew. A few weeks later, I was invited to speak on a panel for internal training. Leads. It wasn't a big deal. Just a roundtable about lessons learned and project strategy, but one of the organizers introduced me with a line that stuck in my head. "This is someone who knows how to get a project over the finish line, no matter what's going on behind the scenes." I knew what she meant. So did the handful of people on the call who had been there for it. Afterward, I got a few more DMs. Congratulatory. Curious. One person asked how I stayed calm during the redesign phase. I didn't give them the whole story. I just said, documentation helps. In the months that followed, I was trusted with 2 more major projects. Both high profile, both at-risk accounts. I applied the same playbook. Clear expectations, strong backups, transparent collaboration, and they both delivered on time. There was no sabotage this time. No second guessing. Just good work with a team that had each other's backs. Every so often, I'd open the old shared folder, just to make sure the archived backups were still there. They were untouched. Eventually, I moved them offline. I didn't need them anymore. But I kept them anyway. Not for revenge. Just as a reminder of what nearly happened, and how close one person came to taking down a project that dozens of others had worked hard to build. In the months that followed, no one dared bring her up by name. She wasn't just removed from the project folder or the org chart, she was treated like a ghost. If someone mentioned her in passing, the room got quiet. People shifted in their seats. You could feel the discomfort, like everyone had silently agreed. "We don't talk about that." But I kept noticing the effects she left behind. Not in broken files or undone work, those had been recovered. It was in the people. My team, once upbeat and confident, had grown cautious. They double-checked approvals that used to be routine. They hesitated to share early versions of work. One designer told me they started keeping screenshots of everything they submitted, just in case. I hated that. Not because I blamed them, because I understood it too well. We had all seen how quickly someone could step in, take over, and nearly destroy something for the sake of ego. And the system hadn't stopped her. We had. The trust we'd had in leadership to protect the team from interference. Gone. Now, everyone documented. Everyone saved backups. It made the work slower. But no one wanted to be caught off guard again. Meanwhile, changes started happening in leadership. Quiet ones. The review process was overhauled. Project ownership protocols were rewritten. They rolled out a new access policy. No one outside a project team could modify files without written approval. A few of us knew why those changes were happening. The rest of the company just accepted the updates like they were part of a regular audit. But deep down, I knew, this wasn't about policy. It was about damage control. They couldn't admit what had happened without opening themselves up to questions they didn't want to answer. Who hired her? Why was she given full access? Why did no one intervene sooner? If you ask around, the official line was that certain projects revealed gaps in our oversight model. That's how they put it. Like a spreadsheet needed tweaking, not like someone almost tanked a six-figure client deal with a keyboard and a smile. But I didn't push. I didn't need to. They knew. One day, someone from the recruiting team reached out. They were redesigning the onboarding guide for new hires, and wanted to borrow some insights from the training project I had rescued. They asked if I'd be willing to consult on their structure. I said yes. During our kickoff meeting, the recruiter said something offhanded that stuck with me. We're trying to avoid situations like last year, when things got too top-heavy and messy. I asked what she meant, curious how much she knew. She hesitated, then said, there was someone who got hired into a role that didn't make sense. She made a lot of noise, then vanished. Everyone tiptoed for a while after that. It was surreal hearing someone else describe it like folklore, something that happened to the company, not to real people who had cleaned up the mess. But she wasn't wrong. The mess left a mark, and the system around it had finally been forced to adapt. I'll never know what happened to her after she left. No one said whether she was fired or asked to resign. No one ever admitted who had hired her or why she was given so much control so fast. It was like she'd been dropped in from nowhere and disappeared the same way. I did search her name once, just out of curiosity. Her LinkedIn profile still listed her job title at the company, but the dates had been shortened. The summary section was vague. Generic leadership jargon. There were no recommendations. And that told me everything I needed to know. Someone like her doesn't quit when they're ahead. They rewrite the story when they lose. In the quiet that followed her departure, something strange happened. People started listening to me. Not just hearing me out in meetings, but actually listening. Asking for input. Taking notes when I spoke. Teams I hadn't worked with before were forwarding requests, asking if I could weigh in on their content structure, review flow, or user feedback strategy. I hadn't asked for any of this. But after everything that had happened, I'd become a known quantity. The person who kept a sinking project afloat without making a scene. The one who didn't throw blame, didn't play the victim, and still delivered the product. Apparently, that was rare enough to matter. One day, my director scheduled a one-on-one, out of the blue. I assumed it was routine. Then I noticed the invite title, Strategic Planning, Expansion Tracks. The conversation started casually, but then she got serious. I want you to consider stepping into a broader role, she said. We've seen how you manage projects, mentor teams, and handle pressure. I think it's time you had more room to operate. I was caught off guard. I hadn't pushed for a promotion. I hadn't even updated my resume in months. But here it was, recognition that didn't come with spin, or office politics, or having to chase someone down for it. She asked me to draft my own vision for what the role could be. That weekend, I sat at my kitchen table with a notebook and started writing. What I wanted to build, how teams could collaborate without bottlenecks, what kinds of people made great cross-functional leads, and how to protect projects from the kind of interference we'd just survived. I didn't write a single bullet point about titles or salary. I just wrote about doing better. When I accepted the offer, I made one condition. I didn't want to inherit someone else's mess. If I was going to lead a team, it had to be one built on trust, clear process, and accountability. No more power-hungry outsiders dropped in without context. No more pretending conflict wasn't happening. If I was expected to take ownership, I wanted the space to actually own what I built. They agreed. And for the first time in years, I felt like I wasn't cleaning up after someone else. I was building from scratch. Outside work, things shifted too. I had a few people, former teammates and new colleagues, ask how I handled it. Not just the technical side, but the emotional exhaustion. The gaslighting. The long stretch of silence where no one seemed to see what was happening. The truth is, I didn't handle it perfectly. I lost sleep. I second-guessed myself. I got angry. But I also documented, asked for help, and stayed professional, even when I wanted to blow up a meeting and scream. And that made the difference. Not because it was the right thing to do, but because it gave me control. Control over the story. Over the evidence. Over how I showed up when it counted most. So when it was finally over, I didn't just survive. I walked away with leverage. The team I eventually built didn't make the same mistakes. We over-communicated. We checked assumptions. If someone started overstepping, we talked about it early. I told every new hire the same thing. Document everything. Not because something bad will happen, but because if it does, you'll be ready. That wasn't cynicism. It was resilience. And it made our project stronger than anything I'd worked on before. By the time the fiscal year closed, our new training platform had been deployed to over a dozen departments. Completion rates were up, satisfaction surveys were glowing, and support tickets had dropped to nearly zero. The results spoke for themselves. I was invited to present a retrospective during a company-wide town hall, a 15-minute segment about how we delivered a high-impact solution under pressure. I accepted, but I didn't turn it into a victory lap. I talked about what worked. How the team stayed adaptive. How strong documentation and clear roles kept us moving forward when things got messy. I didn't mention the sabotage. Didn't name the person who tried to derail it. Didn't show the backups I still had saved, just in case. I didn't need to. The people who needed to know already knew. The rest just saw a clean launch and a well-run project. And that, ironically, was the most satisfying revenge of all. I never found out exactly how she was removed. I'm sure there was some closed-door meeting, maybe an HR review, maybe a legal conversation about access and deletion. It didn't matter. She was gone. And what she tried to destroy. It outlived her. I kept seeing traces of her in old documents for a while. A comment thread with her initials. A draft file she never removed. But each month, those traces disappeared. Scrubbed out as new work replaced the old. Eventually, it was like she'd never been there at all. And yet, I remembered. Not just the chaos, but the lesson. One person can do a lot of damage, if no one stands up to them. But with the right prep, the right team, and a clear head, they can be stopped. And when they are, they usually vanish fast. Every so often, someone still asks if I ever got an apology. From the company. From the people who hired her. From the managers who waited too long to intervene. The answer is no, there was no formal acknowledgement. No one came down from HR with a quiet, "You were right." But I got something better. I got trusted with bigger projects. Promoted. Asked to build new systems. Given a seat at the table where decisions actually get made. And every single time someone asked me how I'd built such a reliable process, I smiled and thought of her. Not because I missed the conflict, but because without her, I might never have had the chance to prove exactly what I was capable of. This wasn't revenge in the loud, cinematic sense. There were no grand takedowns. No viral exposés. No courtroom drama. Just a quiet ending. A career repaired. A reputation cemented. And one less saboteur in the system.